morning, everyone. I apologize for my lateness. Sorry about that. J'ouvre maintenant la séance.
I call this meeting to order and welcome to meeting number 7 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health.
Meet on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Most of our witnesses are basically online, so I will have to, for their sake, reread all of the instructions that you guys know by heart now. And so I'd like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. At the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be directed through the chair and not directly to the person you wish to speak. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, you know how to raise your hand on a Zoom. Please, there's a raise hand function. If you can check it out now so you know how to use it. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can based on whose hand we see first, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this matter. So, pursuant to the motion adopted on Tuesday, September the 23rd, 2025, the committee shall commence the study on the impact of immigration policy on healthcare and barriers to integrating internationally trained professionals. I want to welcome our witnesses. Please note, per each witness, that you have 5 minutes to present, and that 5 minutes is for your organization. So if there are 2 of you who wish to speak, you're going to have to split your 5 minutes. I will give you a 1 minute and a 30-second shout out when you're coming close to time. I just go 1 minute or 30 seconds so you know how to wrap up, because some of the points you may not have been allowed to finish, people will ask you questions so you can elaborate on that then. After you've presented, there will be a question and answer session, and the question and answer will be limited in terms of timing to questions and answers, not just to questions and then another set of time for answers. So I will, again, do the same thing, give you a 1 minute and a 30-second shout out so you know how you're doing. Now, today, for the sake of those listening, we have from 11 a.m., the first hour of this meeting, we have Vanessa Foran, from Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Anesthesiologist Society, and Dr. Giuseppe Fuda, who is the President. We have the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing, and that's Dr. Rani Srivastava, President-elect. We have the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, Dr. Christopher Watling, Chief Executive Officer. These are our witnesses, and so once again, we will start with the Canadian Anesthesiologist Society. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Thank you very much. Please begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. My name is Vanessa Foran. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Anesthesiologist Society, and today I am joined by Dr. Giuseppe Fuda, President of CAS and a practicing anesthesiologist in Montreal. The Canadian Anesthesiologist Society, or CAS, is the national voice of the anesthesiology in Canada and is a not-for-profit, volunteer-led organization focused on advocacy, education, and research. We represent more than 2,500 healthcare professionals across the country. Our members include anesthesiologists, family physician anesthetists, medical residents, and anesthesia assistants, all united by an unwavering commitment to deliver safe, high-quality perioperative care for patients across Canada. Many people are not aware that postoperative mortality within 30 days is the 3rd leading cause of death in the world after cancer and cardiovascular disease. Your anesthesiologist is there to reduce the risk, your guardian angel at one of the most vulnerable times of your life. Our members are physicians who keep you safe before, during, and after surgery, monitoring every heartbeat, every breath, every vital sign, and leading resuscitation when complications occur. Anesthesiologists also provide care beyond the operating room in critical care, labor and delivery, emergency medicine, and acute and chronic pain management. They are increasingly involved in procedures outside the OR, such as interventional radiology and procedural sedation. We sincerely thank you for the opportunity to contribute to your study on the impact of immigration policy and barriers to integrating internationally trained professionals. I will now hand this over to Dr. Fuda. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. Canada is facing a serious anesthesia workforce shortage at the moment, one that contributes to surgical backlogs and reduced access to care. Ce manque de ressources humaines touche
This
non
lack
seulement
of human resources affects not only anesthesiologists, but also nurses, those who deal with inhaling therapy and assistants in the operating room.
US. This shortfall is compounded by an aging workforce, burnout, and expanded responsibilities outside the operating room. To ensure patients continue to receive timely surgical care, both short and long-term solutions are needed. These were outlined in our 2023 Human HR Resources Position Statement, and that includes a significant increase in anesthesiology residency positions, recognition of healthcare workers' credentials between hospitals, regions, and provinces to allow flexible redeployment where needed, redirection of select surgeries to underutilized centers, expansion of anesthesia training programs to better support anesthesiologists, and then support for physician well-being and retention, and also analysis of institution-specific efficiencies. One key opportunity directly relevant to your study is to simplify and accelerate the licensing of international trained anesthesiologists while maintaining our unwavering commitment to patient safety. Currently, pathways for international trained physicians are fragmented and consistent across provinces. For example, the Royal College approved jurisdictions route recognizes training from only 4 international certifying bodies, leaving most qualified anesthesiologists to navigate complex, lengthy, and costly equivalency assessments. Il faut aussi tenir compte du fait que la qualité
You also have to take into account that the quality and the duration of medical training plays enormously in this matter.
Requirement. Physicians who immigrate to Canada often lose licensure eligibility because they cannot maintain active practice abroad while waiting for accreditation here. In some provinces, they must even return overseas for. In some provinces, they must even return overseas for a month at a time to preserve their eligibility. Une exigence irréaliste pour les nouveaux arrivants et leurs familles.
Something that is not realistic for many.
The European Union provides a useful model. Physician trains in approved jurisdictions with harmonized standards are recognized automatically with 4 months. When training gaps exist, it provides adaptation periods of targeted assessments to ensure safety and fairness. Language proficiency, professional conduct, and continuous quality assurance are all verified. En résumé, la Société canadienne des anesthésistes recommande d'établir.
We recommend, therefore, that there should be increased transparency with respect to foreign anesthesiologists training, their qualifications, and do what is necessary to help them provide sustainability in anesthesiology.
I now go to the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing, and I would ask Dr. Srivastava, President-elect, please. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Dr. Srivastava, could you tilt your thing so we can see you full? Because sometimes you're only seeing your chin is out of the picture. Thank you. So just tilt it. That's great. Thank you. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Rani Srivastava, and I'm the President-elect of the Board of Directors of the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing, or CASN. I also serve currently as Dean of Nursing at Thompson Rivers University in British Columbia, and I've previously worked in roles in practice as Vice President and Chief Nursing Executive. I am not an internationally educated nurse, but I have worked closely with IENs in practice and education. The Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing is the national voice for nursing education in Canada, representing 93 member institutions across the country. CASN supports the education of registered nurses, registered psychiatric nurses, and nurse practitioners. We commend the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health for undertaking this important study for integration of IENs. The motion introduced by MP Dan Maziere addresses a critical issue. Canada is facing a nursing workforce crisis. Over the past 5 years, nursing vacancies have tripled. We have significant challenges in both recruitment and retention. Data indicates that in a pan-Canadian survey, 4 in 10 nurses report they intend to leave their job, the profession, or retire within the next year. The impact is significant on the professionals and the quality of care and patient safety. Internationally educated nurses who choose to migrate to Canada are an invaluable and a grossly underutilized resource. We must remove unnecessary bureaucratic barriers for licensure. The internationally educated nurses immigrate to Canada from all over the world with variation in education, professional nursing culture and expectations, and different healthcare systems experience. There are two main barriers that IENs face: regulatory complexity and workplace integration challenges. Regulatory bodies work to ensure public safety through a rigorous process of credential recognition. For IENs to be part of a sustained solution, CASN recommends focused attention in three areas: streamlining the registration process and pairing that with quality bridging education, and lastly, workplace integration support for both short-term and long-term success. Collectively, we must adopt a coordinated, evidence-informed, and ethical approach. Streamlining, harmonizing registration is already happening. In response to the pandemic and the exacerbation of long-standing nursing shortage, nursing regulatory bodies have collaborated with governments, employers, and professional associations. A recent scan of 20 nursing regulatory bodies across Canada found that while licensure requirements are broadly consistent across jurisdictions, notable differences exist in the pathways, particularly in recency of practice requirements and expedited pathways for internationally educated nurses, leading to inconsistencies and inequities in licensure pathway and creating unnecessary complexity. There is a need to further explore this harmonization and consistency of pathways. This requires commitment. Competency assessment we know is important, but it often becomes the bottleneck with partnerships between regulators and post-secondary educators can be hugely beneficial. CASN also asks for an establishment of a joint commission between the Canadian Council of Nurse Regulators, CASN, CNA, and employers to ensure alignment between the needs and strengths of all of the stakeholders. Lastly, we ask for exploring international partnerships, including Canadian accreditation of international schools and IEN residency structures, to reduce this redundancy and accelerate the licensure. Ensuring quality bridging education is the second piece. These are important tools that can support not just entry to practice, but also successful integration, both in the long term and short term. These programs require ability to accommodate the unique needs and experiences of IEN learners through responsive pedagogy, flexible learning-centered programming that is practice-oriented. The ability to provide responsive and effective bridging education hinges on increased sustainable funding of public educational institutions. National standards for bridging education and an accreditation program will ensure the quality of bridging education. And lastly, the third prong is to provide practice support for both short-term and long-term integration. This requires commitment and partnership between the IENs entering the workforce and the existing professionals in the system. Employers need to support both, recognizing the needs of both parties.
Please wrap up, Doctor.
CASN's internationally educated mentorship program provides examples where such support can be provided. To summarize, the world is facing a global nursing shortage and Canada must act now. To support the IEN integration, that should be seen as a key pillar of a broader HHR strategy for nursing. That includes strengthening Canadian nursing education and integration of IEN.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I go to the final witness from the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, Dr. Christopher Watling. Start, Doctor. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Watling. I'm a neurologist, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. I'm speaking to you today from the ancestral territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Chonnonton Nations, London, Ontario. A little bit about us at the Royal College. The Royal College is a national not-for-profit organization that represents over 50,000 specialist physicians and surgeons across over 100 different disciplines in Canada and around the world. We're the voice of specialty medicine in Canada, and we set the standards for specialty medical education, assessment, and lifelong learning, and we also do what we can to promote sound health policy. So in that vein, I'm very grateful for this opportunity today to highlight some of the challenges that internationally trained specialist physicians face when they move to Canada and try to integrate into our healthcare workforce. Estimates vary, but we think there may be as many as 13,000 internationally trained physicians in Canada who are not in practice. Internationally trained physicians have identified that the process to becoming a practicing physician in Canada is challenging, time-consuming, and often confusing. The government has thus far very appropriately focused on getting internationally trained primary care physicians, family doctors into practice. We agree with that at the Royal College, but we also want to point out that optimizing the Canadian healthcare workforce requires attention to both primary and specialty care because they are interdependent. I'm just going to identify some of the various routes to getting to be a certified specialist physician in Canada and some of the specific areas that we might be able to improve or have already improved. Internationally trained physicians who've not yet completed residency or postgraduate training or who are willing to retrain in Canada have the option of matching into a Canadian residency training program through the Canadian Residency Matching Service. Related to this route, the Royal College encourages the government to ensure that there remains equitable access to all eligible IMGs to that match process to help to best meet the needs of the system. Second, internationally trained physicians who've already completed residency training and practiced abroad in their specialty may complete a practice-ready assessment. And this pathway consists of a clinical workplace-based assessment, usually lasting around 12 weeks. There are currently 9 provinces that offer these, but only 3 offer them for specialist physicians. Those are Alberta, Manitoba, and Quebec. Third, internationally trained physicians who've completed residency training abroad in a recognized specialty and whose residency training is quite similar to that would occur in Canada may also use what we call the practice eligibility route. And that requires them to take an examination and to complete 2 years of observed practice in Canada. We've had great support from a grant from the federal government and have had some success in simplifying and streamlining this pathway. And we've seen applications increase 400% and processing times drop from several months to several weeks. And then finally, we have specific routes for U.S. trainees and trainees from other approved jurisdictions where training is recognized as substantially equivalent to Royal College training. And these trainees can apply directly to take a Royal College exam. And once they pass that exam, they would be certified without requiring observed practice time in Canada. Well, what more can be done? First, we think that practice-ready assessment route is underused and has the potential to expand. Practice-ready assessment is a quicker and cost-efficient way of licensing internationally trained physicians compared to a typical residency program, which can last 2 to 6 years. So we'd encourage the government to consider developing a federal program that supports an expansion of practice-ready assessments for both family doctors and specialist physicians. Second, we think more can be done to address the challenge of internationally trained physicians in Canada who are just missing a handful of competencies that would be required to meet the full scope of a Canadian credential. We'd encourage the government to consider a funding pool that could help medical schools to provide top-up training to those physicians that would allow them to more quickly transition into practice. Third, we think we can do more to support the additional learning that internationally trained physicians require to bridge cultural competency and learning gaps. For example, regardless of where you've trained, if it's outside of Canada, you likely lack information about Indigenous health and Indigenous cultural competency, and we would encourage making that training a requirement for all physicians trained internationally, and we're happy to work on that with the government. And finally, I'll just point out we've done a lot of consulting with internationally trained physicians this summer, and many of them pointed out that labor market assessments are a major pain point in their process of getting into Canada. So now's the time, we think, for everyone in the healthcare system to consider alternative solutions to streamline the immigration and licensing processes for internationally trained physicians so that they can enter the system more efficiently and provide necessary care. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, before we go to the question and answer round, I don't know what's going on, but I'm having a lot of trouble squinting at because there's a huge glare from where I sit. For you guys, it's okay, but it's your head. I think it's bouncing off. Mr. Doherty, absolutely. You're very correct. We'll get your cap next time. All right, but no, I from where I sit, I can hardly see the witnesses because there's a glare and it's really bothering. So I don't know what we can do, guys. If we can straighten the television sets, it might diminish that glare because it's really difficult to see. But anyway, we'll just carry on regardless. And so I begin the question and answer. Just to remind everyone, this is a 6-minute round, and 6 minutes are for questions and answers. And if we're going to get everyone to be able to ask questions, I'm going to have to cut you guys off. So I'm going to give you a 1 minute, 30-second count to those who are questioning and those who are answering. You will always have an opportunity in another round to finish off what you were saying. So I begin with Mr. Major for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the witnesses for coming here this morning. Dr. Watling, does the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada support national or pan-Canadian licensure so doctors can work across provinces and territories without barriers?
We do.
Dr. Fuda, does the Canadian Anesthesiologists Society support national or pan-Canadian licensure so doctors can work across provinces and territories without barriers?
Not only do we support it, it's already part of our position statements. I will go furthermore. The Atlantic provinces actually already have a licensure for the Atlantic Canada. And one thing that's precarious for anesthesiologists.
Thank you. You do support it then. That's great. Dr. Watling, does the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada agree that population growth is one of the factors impacting Canada's healthcare system? Yes or no?
Yes.
Immigration is a form of population growth then, correct?
Population grows in a variety of ways, including immigration, yes.
Dr. Watling, how many members are there in the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada?
Roughly 50,000.
Did the Federal Immigration Department consult with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada on this year's federal immigration levels plan? Yes or no?
No.
According to this year's immigration levels plan, the federal government is planning to allow 395,000 permanent residents and 673,000 non-permanent residents into Canada this year. Will all these individuals be able to get a family doctor this year if they want one?
I think we have a lot of evidence that Canadians lack for family doctors quite significantly. You'll hear more from my colleagues at the College of Family Physicians in the next hour, I think.
Okay, and will these individuals, they'll have to go to emergency rooms to see doctors, and because they won't have access to a family doctor, that's probably fair to...
Well, I think that maybe diminishes efforts that are going on across the country to try to improve access to family physicians and to specialist physicians. So, there's certainly hope that situation is improving as a result of some of the work that's already underway.
Dr. Watling, earlier this month, the Federal Minister of Health stated, and I quote, "Right now, there's no alignment on immigration and the need for doctors," end quote. Do you agree that there is a disconnect between immigration policy and healthcare capacity?
I am not sure that I have the expertise to speak about immigration policy. I think there's a lot of things driving that are not exclusively related to healthcare.
We just talked about not having enough. Canadians can't have enough. Don't have family doctors. 6.5 million Canadians don't have a family doctor right now. There's lineup in emergency rooms. So, and we just heard that the 395,000 permanent residents and 673, almost a million more immigrants are coming into the system. So, and you have not been consulted. So do you think there's a disconnect?
I think it would be nice to see a stronger link between these things, yes.
The Globe and Mail reported this month, and I quote, on Tuesday, when the Health Minister Marjorie Michel was asked if she would introduce something similar to Bill C-5, which would remove barriers for interprovincial labor movement, but not physicians and other health professionals, she said yes. Is this a type of legislation something the college would support?
Sorry, the legislation that you're talking about is to improve interprovincial movement of physicians. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're very supportive of that, and I think it links to that issue around pan-Canadian licensure.
Yeah, and I thought it was important too, but the Globe and Mail article went on to state, and I quote, however, on Wednesday, Ms. Michel's Director of Communications clarified that Ms. Michel misunderstood the question and that the government won't be tabling legislation on this issue, end quote. Does that concern you?
Well, I had felt similarly optimistic when I saw the initial comments, so it disappoints me.
Okay. How many internationally trained physicians are currently in Canada but not working as a doctor?
I don't think anybody knows. To be exact, we've guessed at around 13,000.
You don't think anybody knows? You've never seen any numbers, any reports?
Well, I think it is just difficult information to come by, and we've seen numbers, but they vary quite widely. So 13,000 is a reasonable number, but it's hard to know if it's accurate.
Matt, did you want to?
We have 21 seconds. 20 seconds, Matt.
Oh, sure. I'll just start with some questions for Dr. Fuda. Thank you for being here. I think we all agree that Canada is currently short on anesthesiologists. I was wondering if your society has hard numbers on that. How many anesthesiologists are we short
of? That's a good question. It varies very much geographically speaking. Some provinces are hit more than others. Right now, the shortage is much higher in Ontario.
I will allow this answer, and then we run out of time. Thank you.
But we don't have a specific number.
Thank you very much. We now go to Mr. Ailson of the Liberals. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Chair.
You have 6 minutes.
Thank you all for coming. Dr. Fuda, thank you for your comments on that. My wife is an anesthetist, so I've heard her say many of the same things that you have said regarding, shortages of anesthetists and how this, will often cause cases to be canceled and care delayed. We talked about accelerating the training of these international graduates. We know that there's always been a difficulty in coordinating between the federal government and the provinces. What is the role? What role do you see the federal government playing in that? How can we help facilitate this within the provinces?
That's a very good question. Definitely, that I think that one issue is that it's fine. We need resources to be able to evaluate some of these people. So sometimes this is an issue. You actually need to pay these individuals or these professionals to be able to do proper evaluation. And I'm sure Dr. Watling could, attest to that. So definitely, that's one of the things. I guess in terms of immigration policies as well, like we said, one issue right now is that doctors that are in Canada presently, if they don't work within a certain time frame, are actually not eligible anymore. So I think that they should try to speak with each other in provinces and there's facilitating pathways for these people to still become eligible, despite the fact that they may have been out of practice for 18 or 24 months, or sometimes even longer. So try to see how we can bridge that gap and have these people be able to be here and actually practice, rather than sometimes doing jobs that are completely unrelated to their initial training.
Absolutely. So do you see would a federal policy help saying that, these should be done within these evaluations should be done within a certain length of time?
I mean, I think it'd be good if there's a way for these people to, because they get lost also in paperwork, right? And all these challenges, there has to be some sort of streamlined way for these individuals, these doctors, to be able to go through a pathway and apply, and like you said, give a certain time frame within which they should be able to get an answer on whether or not they can pursue that career.
All right, thank you. Now, for the schools of nursing, thank you for your testimony there. We talked about failure of retention. What would you say is the one reason for failure of retention for these nurses that are here and are no longer practicing?
I think there are multiple reasons. The retention has to do with both for domestically educated nurses as well as IENs. The workforce shortage, the stresses of the employment system, the lack of supports, those all contribute, and the specifics will vary from province to province and specialty area and particular practice setting. But those are in general what is cited as the challenges that nurses are experiencing.
All right, thank you. And are you aware of any barriers that these new nurses have, these internationally trained nurses, from the immigration point of view? Are they having trouble getting visas? Are they having trouble getting citizenship?
I do not have information on that. I apologize.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Wadling, yeah, I'm a graduate of the Royal College program in emergency medicine, and I've served on the committee of examiners, so I'm well familiar with your organization's work. Now, I just want to make sure, I'm sure I know the answer to this, but for the committee, the certification Royal College is recognized nationally. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a Royal College certification in emergency medicine, and I have that certification in any province in Canada.
Correct.
Yes. Has your for specialty physicians, has your organization had any outreach with provincial licensing bodies? When someone is certified by the Royal College, the Royal College, is basically giving the stamp of approval, saying, this individual is now qualified to practice in this surgery, whether it is psychiatry, surgery, emergency medicine. Is there any talk or any strategy to basically communicate with the provincial licensing bodies to say,
1 minute?
Thank you. That we have determined that this person is safe to practice this specialty, and grant a license to practice that specialty in that province or any province?
Yes, we communicate closely and regularly with the provincial licensing bodies and confirm people's credentials.
All right, but what I mean is there's still, when they apply for a license, there's still a process in each province they have to get the license.
That's right.
Is there any talk about basically shortcutting that process to say
3 seconds?
Thank you, that we have the competency, can you give this person a license?
Yes, we would love to see the Royal College certification just be recognized nationally as a gold standard and simplify that process, because right now people have to apply separately in each jurisdiction, with the exception of the Atlantic issue that Dr. Fuda referenced.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. Now go to... You have 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you to our witnesses. I will continue in the vein of accreditation. What type, Mr. Rutland, do you have? What type of cooperation do you have with the various colleges that distribute the accreditations? Is there some way that this process could be made more efficient? Is the College of Medicine more or less rigorous? Or should we perhaps think about standardizing the accreditation process?
By accreditation, I will ask, are you referring to the licensing process for physicians or to the process of, we think of accreditation as being related to the quality of training programs, but you're talking about individual physicians?
Exactement, le permis
Yes,
d'exercer.
I'm referring to the licensing to practice, the various equivalencies that are given.
So, as was already said, Royal College certification is recognized by every provincial and territorial licensing body in the country. Are there opportunities to smooth out and streamline the process of licensing? I would suspect absolutely yes. We're not a licensing body, and so although we have regular conversations about trying to share credentialing information to make this as easy as possible, I think you'll also want to ask this of the Federation of Medical Regulatory Authorities representative who comes in next.
Merci.
Thank you. Dr. Fuda, earlier you spoke about the ratio, 9 out of 100,000. What would be the ideal ratio? That depends on the countries. That depends on the structures. Not all systems are comparable, but it perhaps 25 to 30% could represent something more robust if it were possible. It would allow us to offer more services in terms of an anesthesiology when we are so short-handed. So, nonetheless, you can meet the needs that exist. I understand that you certainly work monumentally hard. Your hours are long. And how can I say? Certainly that shouldn't be the common practice. Yes, I have colleagues in Saskatchewan who work 90-hour weeks. You can do that perhaps for 2 or 3 years of your career, and it won't hurt you, but you will suffer on the long term if you do that. So the system cannot compensate that. And also, particularly in the operating room, we require greater resources in terms of scoping, in terms of respiratory doctors. So that is the bread and butter of our work. We're supposed to have these tools. And if we did have better ones, people could have a bit more breathing room. Yes, but it will require certainly more means and more money and funding to pay for these resources. $9.6 billion over 10 years in terms of health transfers from the federal government. Does that reflect the ability to further hire people? And should there be a substantial effort made further to that? Dr. Fuda? And Dr. Watland as well, please.
Je suis pas un comptable.
Well, I'm not an accountant, but the amount that you say. So, Dr. Watland, please.
I think there's a range of ways of actually getting more people into practice. To me, I think the one of the key areas with regard to internationally trained specialists is getting them much more quickly assessed for their readiness to practice, topping up things that they're missing, and being able to move them into practice quickly that way. Yes, that will require some additional investment, and I think targeted investment around assessments that will be faster and more efficient and standardized nationally, I think would be worthwhile.
You have 13 seconds.
Ça me mélange un peu vos interventions.
When you intervene, it mixes me up a little bit, Madam Chair. I thought my time was over, but I'd like to come back to an interesting point that was brought up by Madame Suess. And It is this. There was a difficulty with respect to retaining as well as recruiting. Now, with respect to retention, is that because of the working conditions, or is it because of the high capacity of integration that you see for these foreign-trained specialists or nurses?
Doctor, you can answer that in another round. You can fill in that answer because we've gone well over time now. Thank you very much. Second round, I'd like to explain this round. It's a round of 5 minutes. 5 minutes is going to be for the Conservative and Liberals. Will have 2 parts in that, and the Bloc Québécois will have a 2.5 minutes to do it. So I begin with Mr. Strauss for the Conservatives. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Some more questions for Dr. Fuda. So, Dr. Fuda, you didn't have a hard number for how many anesthetists we were short. Do you have a qualitative sense? Is it severe? Is it terrible? Is it outstanding? Or is it a moderate shortage of anesthesiologists by your lights right now?
So I would say that it was a lot worse 3 years ago, but now as medical faculties have increased residency positions and more IMGs have been hired across the country, we are now probably in a moderate stage, I would say. So it's not as dire as it was a few years ago.
Do you have a sense of how many anesthesiologists are currently being trained in Canada? So from the CARMS matching data, I would estimate about 600. Is that about your view?
You probably know better than me the hard numbers, so I would agree with you if you've seen it.
Oh, perfect. Thanks for that. And then I have another report from CAPER, and I just want to get so that's the Canadian Post-MD Education Registry, and they describe that 187 anesthesia residents currently are visa trainees. So they're usually from another country. The majority of those are from Saudi Arabia or other kind of Gulf dictatorships. Do those numbers sound about right to you?
It sounds about right. It's definitely possible.
And then, is it your understanding that such visa trainees who are I guess sponsored by Gulf states, that they generally return to their home country either because they have a return of service agreement or because of personal preference?
I would say that the vast majority of them does return to their own country or definitely leave Canada after their training.
And so and I guess I will say on background, it's very common for members of this committee and even all MPs in this House to be contacted by Canadian citizens who did med school in Ireland or Australia or the Caribbean, or the UK or the United States, who are just desperate to get a residency here. From your point of view, is there any reason that these Canadian graduates of other internationally trained medical schools couldn't use those 187 spots that currently Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states are using?
I mean, that's an interesting question, and I'm not too sure they would take the same spots because the Saudi Arabians are not part of the CARM spots, so they're basically they're add-ons basically to the normal numbers. So you're basically talking about different pools here. So if you have someone from training from Ireland, you actually would have to integrate the normal CARMS pathway in those numbers.
Yeah. So it seems to me that if the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is, as far as I'm aware, is a theocratic dictatorship, is willing to pay your way through medical training in Canada, then you get special treatment. But our own Canadian citizens who are training in Ireland cannot receive such special treatment. Is that about correct?
I mean, I don't know if it's correct in the sense that these IMGs are also eligible to apply to CARMS, just like every other Canadian candidate, unless I'm wrong, Dr. Watling. But it is my impression that they are eligible, especially coming from Ireland. There are 4 different countries where they can apply directly, but as an IMG. So there's IMG-specific spots available through CARMS.
Right, but they're not able to avail themselves of this special paid for by the Saudi Arabian government pathway. And I guess that's what I view as a crying shame. But on a bit of a different topic.
Although to be the devil's advocate, they do have more means to go study in those places, very often at a very high price. And not every Canadian has the opportunity to do that. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, but I think our concern is getting enough anesthetists into Canadian ORs. So if we're training folks who are then going back to Saudi Arabia, it's hard to see how our medical education system is serving the needs of the Canadian public. But on a bit of a different topic, my colleague asked some questions of Dr. Watling about whether the immigration ministry had consulted the Royal College about whether we're able to take in
the
numbers that are coming in. Has the Immigration Ministry consulted with the Society of Canadian Anesthesiologists about that same question?
No, we have not.
That seems like another crying shame. And then I have some questions for Dr. Watling. It is my understanding, and I'm also a fellow of the Royal College, it is my understanding that the vast majority of physicians in this country who write the Royal College exam have access to the old questions. Is that your understanding?
30 seconds.
It is not my understanding that most have access to old questions. I think that anyone trained in a Canadian program has access to a lot of supports to be able to prepare them well for exams, because in a lot of ways Canadian programs are really geared for that.
Yeah, so I would characterize it as an open secret. I think everyone knows that Canadian trainees have access to those questions, and it is also my understanding that for most specialties, every year's exam is largely comprised of the old questions. So, is that your understanding?
Thank you. I'm sorry, you've gone over time now,
That
Mr.
is
Strauss.
incorrect.
So we're going to move to the next round, who is Mr. Pulowski. For 5 minutes, please.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm somewhat disappointed from some of this conservative questions, which are using the study as a forum to suggest or to say that the number of immigrants is causing a crisis within our healthcare system. As somebody who continues to work at least a little bit in the healthcare system, I can say a lot of the immigrants, most of the immigrants are young. They're not people who require CT scans, MRIs, colonoscopies, surgeries, ICUs, so they are not a big burden on the healthcare system. On the other hand, you go to the hospitals and you'll be looked after by a nurse who's an immigrant. You'll be looked after by a doctor who's an immigrant. If you have elderly parents and they go to an old folks home, they'll be looked after by PSWs who are overwhelmingly immigrants. Rant over on that. PRAs, and Dr. Watling, you talked about PRAs, practice-ready assessments, being underutilized, and you suggested that there ought to be a federal program to expand this. Could you expand on this a little bit? How many physician specialist positions are there a year that come through the PRA process in Canada?
Well, I don't actually know, because provincial regulators in a few provinces run PRA processes, and when people succeed in them, they go directly to licensure. And I would say the majority of those people who are specialists don't come to the Royal College. We see some people through a PRA, probably only about 50 a year or less, who use that PRA as exam eligibility to then get them to full fellowship with the Royal College. But most PRA actually operates a little bit outside our viewpoint. The expansion of it that I see as possible relates to opportunities to create some national standards, particularly around PRA for specialty medicine. There's some really good programs looking at PRA for family medicine, especially in Nova Scotia and Alberta. But I think we can do more around the specialty area, and I think we'd love to be engaged in helping to develop national standards, national assessment tools, and being able to get people assessed in about a 12-week period, as opposed to the much longer one.
We know you only have a very brief time here. However, you can submit something in writing, and making specific recommendations as how we as the federal government can help to get more people through the PRA process would certainly be welcome. On a second topic, you talked about top-up training. I think that's really important, and certainly those of us who, and I've worked in many countries as a physician, the quality of graduates from different countries is going to vary quite a bit, and rather than making everyone go back to medical school and do it all over again, a lot of people would seem like some people maybe only need months, some people perhaps a year or two. Which provinces are doing a good job in terms of that kind of top-up training? Because it would seem to me that's something really underutilized.
I think it's really underutilized. I think, if I've got this right, that Manitoba is doing a fairly good job of this at the moment. I'm not aware of other programs really systematically looking at that, but I think there's a huge opportunity there to say that you've got 80% of what you require. Let us fill in the gaps, and in 6 to 12 months, you'll be ready to go. Much more efficient than telling someone to apply for a residency.
One of the things we make recommendations coming out of this study, and maybe I could ask everyone around the table on the top-up training. Because should we be doing the same in nursing, same in anesthesia? Should there be more programs for top-up training that would kind of bridge the gap and get people into the system quicker? So maybe I can just ask both the anesthesia people and the nursing school people about that.
1 minute.
Yes, I think it could be a great opportunity. The real question is we also need a robust way to evaluate the baseline, and evaluate whether they need 20%, 40%, 30%. And this is where it gets tricky, is trying to establish that as well. So we definitely need to partnership with universities and with programs to be able to do that. And this is where often the roadblock is.
Dr. Srivastava?
I would agree. The practice ready assessment, the competency assessment is really important. And as Dr. Fuda has said, a partnership between the educational institutions and regulatory bodies would be hugely helpful and beneficial and efficient there. And that forms the basis for then the second piece, which is the top-up training that Dr. Watling so nicely articulated. You need to have a baseline assessment and then determine what percentage, what kind of training is needed. And it is not a one-size-fits-all, that everybody goes into the same pathway.
Thank you very much, and that ends your time, Mr. Pulaski. I now go to Monsieur Thériault for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I've been listening closely for a while now. This issue of manpower shortage is not something new. It's not something that has arisen 5 or 10 years ago, but it goes back at least 20-some years. So how can it be that we haven't settled this problem? We've had 20 years to do it. This slowdown in this ability to have a conversation, to collaborate and to work together as various jurisdictions. How can it be that we haven't been able to succeed in that over 20 years?
Answer specifically? The answer, it seems no one has the answer.
J'ai demandé au Dr. Watling.
Mr. Watling, Dr. Watling?
I share that frustration. I sense at the moment, at least among different medical organizations in Canada, College of Family Physicians, the Federation of Medical Regulatory Authorities, a much greater will to cooperate than we have perhaps seen in the past. I think perhaps some of the historic territoriality is going away, and there's a real desire on our part to work collectively rather than separately. So I feel more optimistic about the next 5 years than perhaps the last 20 years would suggest.
Monsieur Thériault.
Mr. Thériault, microphone. Do you think, or do you have the impression that at a certain point in time there was a type of corporate interest that did not help speed up the issue of credentials being given out or accredited?
Not sure. I would say the biggest thing for me that has been a barrier, particularly with 70-odd specialty disciplines, is a lack of nationally coordinated planning and numbers to help us. You've already seen when you ask for data, how challenging it is for us to put forward exact data. And I think the thing that would really have driven things forward is nationally endorsed and agreed upon planning platforms.
Very much. I now move to Madam Conants. You have 5 minutes, please.
My question is to Dr. Srivastava. In 2022, your organization appeared before this committee, and your executive director, Cynthia Baker, said that in terms of international education, this has to do with the regulatory bodies that license the internationally educated nurses, and this process is slow. There's an evaluation process that is time-consuming, end quote. Where do these processes stand today?
I think, as Dr. Watling has said, there's better cooperation, but that certainly is still an area where there's considerable backlog. every province does the practice assessment. So it's the regulatory bodies, and we'll do the practice assessment and then make recommendations around where, how much of a top up or further competency support is needed.
And so
what kind
is
of a
it,
bridging
would you
program.
consider, excuse me, but would you consider it still too slow?
There's lots of room for improvement still.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. In the same meeting, Dr. Baker spoke that more standardized one-year program across the country for internationally educated nurses so they can be moving along with the process. Is that still the position of the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing?
I think CASN would advocate for a more personalized approach. Some people will need a year, some people may need less, and some people may need focused attention.
So
in
would you
different
say,
areas.
excuse me, but would you say that it's a more standardized program across the country is needed?
I think standardized programs are needed that allow for variations based on the member's practice assessment.
Okay, so there should be a standardized program across the country. A 2022 Health Canada report entitled State of the Health Workforce in Canada found a shortage of 60,000 registered nurses, and that's 2022. That's really no surprise to rural communities, as my writing is. Do these numbers sound accurate to you? That was 2022. Do you feel that they might deepen, or do they sound accurate to you?
They sound accurate. I think the situation is a little bit better, just anecdotally from looking at where our graduates are going and in general the gaps that exist in the practice areas across the system. So the nursing shortage has gotten a little bit better, but there's still lots of room for improvement.
Okay, again, talking about that nursing workforce crisis, you mentioned there's a failure of retention for all nurses. Can you explain, and where, for those that aren't retiring, where do they go?
People leave their workforce to go to a different, sometimes it's a different practice setting, and sometimes they leave the profession altogether and go and do something different.
So they aren't necessarily leaving the country. Would some of them be leaving the country, going to the United States or other countries, if they, especially if they're from originally been trained in another country, not finding a pathway into their to be able to practice?
I think we do lose nurses to the United States. I think many of the internationally educated nurses that come here aren't necessarily leaving the country because this is where their home has become and this is where their families are, but they are leaving the profession, or they're leaving full-time employment for casual employment, travel nursing, things that they feel they are more manageable given the practice environment that they're working in.
So would you say some of these nurses that are trained in other countries and are Canadian back here, or are from immigrants from other countries, do you think that they're given promises that aren't being kept? They're bringing their families here and maybe they aren't even able to practice. Would you say that they're been given promises that just actually are which is disturbing if they come here with certain idea of being a nurse and they're not able to practice? 30 seconds.
I would say that is fair, that many people come with expectations that are more positive than what the reality is when it hits them when they come here.
Okay. Did federal immigration consult with the Canadian Association of Nurses on this year's federal immigration levels?
16 seconds.
Seeing that we have a shortage of nurses and doctors.
Not that I'm aware of such consultation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would you like to be consulted?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Your time is up, Ms. Conants. I now go to Ms. Chi from the Liberals. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses that have appeared before us today. Thank you for your time and your expertise. Really appreciate your perspectives. So my first question, I think it does apply to all three, but I want to really hear what Dr. Watling from you first. So I know there's a line of question that insinuated that immigration is a big pressure point on the system, but we all know that the healthcare system is under quite a bit of pressure that's very complex beyond that. Would you agree that really simplifying the issue that you're facing and your members are facing?
I totally agree that the healthcare system is under a complex set of strains. Yes.
Thank you so much. And could you outline what those constraints that you're hearing from your members? Is it work? There's a global workforce shortage, right? So, that the complexity of the health situation that you're experiencing, and the last point is, the aging demographic that we're facing as a nation. Could you opine and provide some perspective on that?
Yeah, I could probably talk for a long time on this, but briefly, an aging population, an increasing complexity of medical and health concerns, increasing expectations and possibilities in terms of what can be done, which increases the complexity of the work. An ongoing administrative burden for physicians that sometimes really makes it difficult for them to keep as much of their focus on patient care as they would like to. And then complicated system issues. And then finally, we have a country where we have a geographic challenge in having healthcare workers, physicians I can speak to particularly, in having them located where we need them to be. The shortages and the system challenges are not evenly distributed across the country, as you know, and so that's another issue of our geography that I think we need to try to grapple with.
Thank you, Dr. Watling. And my next question is to Dr. Shrivatstava, and thank you for providing a lot of perspective from your members. And I wanted to hear from you in terms of serving remote communities, retention in remote communities, what your experience have been, what you're hearing from your members, and is there anything we could do better, and how can we support that?
I think what we hear from our members is that recruitment and retention in remote communities is a challenge. What helps is, again, a bit of a holistic approach where the community, the employers work collaboratively, because people are moving with their families. And when it does work, it works very well in terms of being able to look at providing establishment into the community so that the employment opportunities, nursing is still predominantly a female-dominated profession. And therefore, for somebody to go and move to a rural community, they would love to, and find job fulfillment, you also need to have opportunities for schooling for your children, partners, those kinds of things. And that's where I see successful models that could be replicated and expanded upon.
Thank you so much. And I'll be sharing my time with Dr. Pawlowski.
Quick question to Dr. Srivastava. Nurse practitioners, I think they're a big part of the solution for rural Canada, where you have maybe 2 doctors in town. You could share the call with a good nurse practitioner. It doesn't seem to me we're graduating enough nurse practitioners. Do you want to talk a little bit about how many nurse practitioner schools we have and what we can do to try to get our numbers up, and how much that's a part of the solution to the problem?
I don't have the exact numbers of NP schools or graduates with me, so I apologize. I don't want to provide incorrect information. I agree with you. NPs are expanding, and they are very much a part of a solution, working with physicians, both in urban centers, but also in rural communities as part of team-based care. So definitely more work is being done. And I think expanding the scope of practice for the NPs, there's a lot of good work that's been done there in those collaborative models, working and providing support. So I would absolutely support that we need to continue to expand that and look at models where there is strong collaboration between physicians in remote communities. And this is where technology is also very helpful to be able to provide the supports needed for new nurse practitioners who may be working without proper mentorship support.
Quick follow-up with Dr. Watling. There's a lot of physicians who've been trained overseas who perhaps would be willing to become physician assistants. And in remote areas, especially people with some surgical skills, who are practicing as physician assistants would seem to me to be a useful avenue. What do you think of the idea of getting more physician assistants out there?
I'm sorry, the time is now 15 seconds
much
over
agree.
time. I'm sorry. I want to thank the witnesses for coming and for spending their time to answer questions. And so I'm going to now, as I thank you, I'm going to suspend the meeting to prepare for the next meeting. Thank you very much.
President, my team went to buy me this headset this morning.
I'll tell you later.
Everybody's awake because you said 15 minutes.
I will begin the meeting. Again, I will now continue with the next group of witnesses. There are 3 witnesses. I just wanted the committee to know that we will go to 1:05 because we started our meeting 5 minutes late. My bad on that one, but we're going to go to 1:05. We will now switch panel. The panels have been switched, and we will now begin with, we have 3 witnesses from the College of Family Physicians of Canada, Dr. Carrie Bernard, who is president, the Federation of Medical Regulatory Authorities of Canada, who is Stephanie Price, Executive Director, Internationally Trained Physicians of Canada, Dr. Thérèse Bichet, Director. So we will begin, and I just wanted to let the witnesses know that you have 5 minutes to present, and I will give you a 1 minute and then a 30-second cue, because I'll have to cut you off at the end of that time, because we then have a question and answer period. And the question and answer period, again, the time allotted for each question and answer is for the question and the answer. So I will give you all these cues so that you can wrap up what you're doing. And so I now begin, and thank you for coming.
Point of order.
I begin with, yes?
Point of order.
Point of order? Sorry?
Sorry, Madam Chair. I just feel I have to make a comment, as I'm only briefly sitting in here, but I have served on a number of committees, and it is customary that if a committee is going to sit past the allotted time, we are all busy. We all have different meetings that we have to go to, that the chair will put the question to the committee that, is it okay that we sit past the allotted time? And I appreciate that you were late, and you apologize for that. But for you just to arbitrarily say that we're going to sit past 1:05 or sit to 1:05 without first canvassing the committee, I just think it's out of our normal committee practice to do that. And I think it would have been proper for you to please petition the committee. We all have to check. I realize it's only 5 minutes, but we all have to check our schedules. And for you just to arbitrarily say that we're going to sit past 1 o'clock, I just think it is an abuse of power in a sense.
I did not actually arbitrarily do it. I told Mr. Major, he did not say no, and I spoke to the Liberals, they did not say no. I did not ask Mr. Thériault, and that is my only fault that I hadn't asked him, but I spoke to everyone else before I began the meeting.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Mr. Doherty. And so now I'll begin the meeting so we don't waste any more time. I'll begin with the first witness, who will be the College of Family Physicians of Canada, Dr. Carrie Bernard. Please begin, Dr. Bernard. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. I'm
Good
Dr.
afternoon,
Carrie,
everyone.
doctor with 25 years of experience practicing in Brampton, Ontario, and the president of the College of Family Physicians of Canada. I'm coming to you today from the Treaty and Traditional Territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Huron-Wendat, and Wyandot Nations. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee on these important and complex issues, the interaction between immigration policy and the health workforce in Canada. Family doctors are the foundation of Canada's healthcare. Our members deliver 50% of all medical services provided to Canadians. International medical graduates comprise 31% of family doctors practicing in Canada. We simply do not train enough domestically. International medical graduates and internationally trained physicians play a crucial part to access to primary care and frequently work in rural and remote communities, providing access to Canadians who would otherwise go without. We know that relative to other OECD countries, Canada trains fewer family doctors per capita. The number is about 4.2 family doctors per 100,000 in Canada, compared to 6 in the UK, 5.8 in Australia, 6.5 in the Netherlands. A recent Health Canada study estimated that there were almost 23,000 family doctors short at this point in time, and over 6 million Canadians report not having a regular family doctor. We cannot begin to address these daunting needs without looking to internationally trained family doctors. As we consider solutions, it's important to clearly state that we must never compromise the high standards of care provided by family doctors. Further, there is no substitute to the type of medical care and expertise provided by family doctors who are licensed and certified, meeting the standards of the College of Family Physicians of Canada. While 92% of medical graduates match to their residency spot of choice, only 24% of international graduates do. These are qualified candidates who could, after postgraduate training, be providing care as a part of the Canadian system, but there isn't enough capacity to accommodate all of them. We must expand the total number of family medicine resident seats to support Canadian and international medical graduates. This is consistent with the federal government's pledge to increase medical school and residency spaces, which we applaud. But anytime we consider increasing training capacity, it's imperative that proportional investments are made in community practices where the residents learn. These sites cannot accommodate extra learners without support. We want to set everyone up for success. In addition, introducing arbitrary barriers to qualify for the CARMS residency match, such as spending 2 years in an Ontario high school, as a recent requirement was issued, is not a way to bolster our workforce. This could contribute to destabilizing the family medicine workforce pipeline. We should expand capacity, not actively push qualified candidates away. I think everyone here believes that the immigration process should align with the needs of Canada's health workforce. Current criteria may welcome skilled health professionals through the comprehensive ranking system, but they provide little support for obtaining credentials needed to contribute once living in Canada. We need to expand programs like practice-ready assessments. This could increase the number of physicians who are ready to enter the workforce while actively contributing to care. Like the Royal College, we would welcome federal support for this. The CFPC is also working to streamline certification pathways so more qualified candidates can join the workforce sooner. We often see candidates from countries with similar family medicine training who may lack certain components, such as training and education in mental health or obstetrics. While these gaps must be addressed, these professionals can still practice in the areas they do have competence, contributing to caring for Canadians as they obtain the extra skills they need to be a fully certified family physician. Such programs require funding. Flexible structures will help integrate health professionals faster and expand workforce capacity. The CFPC is looking forward to supporting this process. Additionally, instances exist where established physicians are facing issues with their immigration status, such as the highlighted story of Michael Antil, an American physician caring for more than 2,000 patients in Toronto who's struggling to get residency status.
Sorry, Doctor, I think we're running out of time. If you can wrap it up, you can fill it in your answer.
100%. We want to maintain standards and support the profession by working towards achieving a family physician for every Canadian and make sure everyone has access, and we're happy to have solutions.
I now go to the next witness, who is the Federation of Medical Regulatory Authorities of Canada, Stephanie Price. You have 5 minutes, please. Ms. Price, welcome.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Price. I'm the Executive Director at the Federation of Medical Regulatory Authorities of Canada. We're the organization that brings together the 13 medical regulatory authorities who regulate physicians, licensing them, and making sure they are accountable to the Canadian public. At FEMRAC, our goal is to advance medical regulation and support the medical regulatory authorities, the MRAs, in their work to protect the public. An important priority for FEMRAC and the MRAs is ensuring that Canadians have reliable access to safe, high-quality care. Physicians are the engine of the healthcare system. They provide the skills and professionalisms needed to deliver high-quality, safe medical care. As this committee has noted, we have a shortage of physicians in Canada. Internationally trained physicians, or ITPs, can help address that shortage in the short term. Many ITPs are a ready source of the skills, knowledge, and care that Canadians need. Currently, there are many challenges facing ITPs. The medical regulatory system in Canada is robust, and that's good for Canadians. We expect all our physicians to be competent, ethical professionals, and the MRAs are dedicated to upholding those standards. While the legislations and policies in practice can vary by province or territory, broadly speaking, applicants for licensure as a physician must meet 5 requirements. They must be able to communicate with their patients, so there is a language requirement. They're trusted professionals who must act ethically with integrity and honesty, so there is a good character requirement. Because their mental and physical health impacts the care that they provide, there's a fitness to practice requirement. And of course, we expect them to have and demonstrate medical knowledge and skills required for care, and we expect them to maintain those skills and knowledge through ongoing clinical practice. For physicians who are educated, trained, and maybe even practiced outside of Canada, there can be challenges in meeting some of those requirements. Pre-immigration, many ITPs are unaware of the requirements of our system, the fact that regulation takes place at the provincial and territorial level, or that there are many different pathways to licensure. One change that could be made to the immigration system would be to provide clear information about licensure, certification, and assessment to ITPs. And providing this information well before they arrive in Canada would allow them to make informed decisions about whether or not to choose Canada. Additionally, for ITPs who are already in Canada, we could provide navigational supports so that they spend their time applying to licensure, not trying to understand the licensure system. Currently, physicians who spend time trying to understand the system lapse in their practice and therefore lose the currency required to gain licensure. Navigational support programs could reduce the amount of time it takes for ITPs to understand and access licensure, getting them into practice and providing care to Canadians sooner. Those navigational supports could also include financial supports to help new immigrants offset the costs associated with licensure and certification. A second improvement would be to align the language requirements between the immigration system and the regulatory one. Currently, the immigration system has a language requirement that doesn't match that of the regulators, meaning there is extra time and expense for ITPs to meet 2 different language test requirements. A third improvement would be to expand how ITPs can demonstrate their medical knowledge and skills. This could include expanding residency programs, which, as we've heard today, train physicians in a specialty and lead to Canadian certification. But we could also expand practice-ready assessment programs. PRA programs are an important way to assess ITPs through direct observation of their clinical skills in a supervised setting. These programs are shorter and less expensive than going through a residency training program. And expanding the number of PRA programs or the spots in PRA programs would increase the number of ITPs who can be assessed and, if successful, licensed. These programs require funding, both for the infrastructure that houses them and for the assessors who work in them, but scaling them up would make a significant difference. With each of those pathways, it's imperative that internationally trained physicians receive comprehensive onboarding and orientation so that they understand how the culture and practice of medicine in Canada may differ from that in their home country. FEMRAC and the MRAs are committed to upholding high standards and increasing the number of ITPs who can access licensure in Canada. We believe it's possible to do both by improving the links between regulation and immigration and by expanding the number of ways in which licensing requirements can be met while maintaining high standards and protecting the public and the safety of Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 13 seconds under. Congratulations. Thank you. I now go to the third witness, internationally trained physicians of Canada, Dr. Bichet. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Dr. Therese Bichet. I'm originally from Egypt, where I completed my medical degree and internship and practiced as a family doctor for several years. Over those years, I had the privilege of walking alongside patients through illness, recovery, and sometimes loss. I built long-term relationships with my patients, providing care with compassion, dedication, and clinical expertise. Practicing medicine was not only my profession, it was and still is my passion and purpose. Like many skilled professionals, I immigrated to Canada with the hope of continuing my medical career and building a better future for my family. Canada's immigration system, in fact, awards immigration points for being a doctor, recognizing our skills as valuable to the country's economy and social fabric. But what many of us discover after arriving is that these points, these promises, do not translate into a path for licensure. The profession we were selected and welcomed for becomes instead a closed door, which is very frustrating. Upon arriving here in Canada, I began the long journey towards licensure. I passed all the required medical exams, had my credentials verified, completed the English language proficiency tests repeatedly as they expire every 2 years, even though language proficiency naturally improves with immersion and time. I completed observerships, worked as a clinical assistant, and currently working as a physician navigator in the emergency department, and yet still not working as a licensed physician. I continue to volunteer, learn, and contribute to my community wherever possible. In addition to all this, in order to meet the recency of practice requirement, which is a mandatory part of all the licensing pathways, I travel back to Egypt every 2 or 3 years to maintain my clinical skills and my recent practice. You can imagine how this has been emotionally, financially, and professionally exhausting, and yet it is the only option available. In Canada, we have no clear or accessible avenues existing for internationally trained physicians to maintain clinical recency if they are not already licensed. It's a big barrier that all of the internationally trained physicians face. Despite all of this, I remain without a license to practice medicine in Canada, and I'm not alone in this. Thousands of internationally educated physicians across the country find themselves in the same position, qualified, experienced, and ready to serve, but sidelined and ignored by a system that is fragmented and opaque. And this is happening at a time when Canada is in the midst of a severe healthcare crisis. More than 6.5 million Canadians do not have the access to a family doctor. Emergency departments are overwhelmed. Wait times for primary care and specialist appointments continue to grow. Communities, especially rural and underserved ones, are struggling without basic medical care. Internationally trained doctors face many barriers which prevent them from stepping in and helping, although they are willing. Like residency positions are both limited and inequitably distributed, with few spots reserved for international graduates. Practice-ready assessment programs are not standardized across all provinces. Each province has its own eligibility requirements, timelines, quotas, which create confusion and limit mobility. Another thing is nearly all pathways require the recent clinical experience, yet there are not enough structured, accessible opportunities for international physicians in Canada to obtain it. Many of us are left with no option but to leave the country if we are even able to do so. The recognition of credentials favors so-called approved jurisdictions, privileging doctors from a select group of countries while effectively discouraging training from the rest of the world, regardless of quality or performance on Canadian exams. The last thing is there are no transitional clinical roles that meaningfully lead to licensure. Many of us are willing to start in supervised or provisional positions that could serve as a bridge, but such pathways are non-existent. It is profoundly disheartening to feel invisible in a country we chose and now call home. We came here not just to build a life, but to contribute meaningfully to our communities and to a healthcare system that desperately needs support. Instead, we find ourselves stuck, our experience undervalued, and our qualifications questioned, and our voices often unheard. This is a national healthcare issue. When qualified physicians are blocked from practice and sidelined, patients suffer. When licensing pathways are opaque and inaccessible, we all pay the cost in delayed care, in overburdened systems, and in human lives. Thank you.
I now go to a segment, and that segment begins with a 6-minute round, and each questioner has 6 minutes, and that includes questions and answers. So I begin with Mr. Major for 6 minutes, please, in the Conservative Party.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the witnesses for coming here today. Dr. Bernard, did the Federal Immigration Department consult with the College of Family Physicians of Canada on this year's Federal Immigration Levels Plan? Yes or no?
No.
Did the Federal Immigration Department ask for any data on the current capacity of Canada's healthcare system?
No.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Bichet, welcome. You graduated medical school, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You completed your training after medical school, correct?
Yes.
You worked as a family doctor for multiple years, correct?
Yeah.
You came to Canada with the expectation that you would be able to be a family doctor, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You are currently working as a family doctor in Canada?
No.
Dr. Bichet, how much money and time have you lost trying to get your medical license in Canada?
Well, how much money? I can tell you around 60K for now.
Wow.
Like between traveling to get the license of practice, so the cost of tickets, the cost of exams, the money I pay every year for CARMS, some practice ready assessment, like we need to pay for it.
Holy.
The preparing for exams, and even taking time off my work to study for exams or prepare for anything, losing my job sometimes to go back to Egypt to get the recent practice. So I can tell 60 to 70K for now.
Wow. Oh, heartbreaking. Dr. Bichet, do you agree that there is a disconnect between the immigration system and the healthcare system in Canada?
Yes, there's a big gap between the two, because when you are immigrating, you feel that you are welcomed and the process is easy. Once you come here, it's a clear process. You get your exams done, you will be able to practice, but there is no connection, because when you arrive here, you find it a total different process.
You mentioned that you fly back to Egypt every couple of years to practice medicine so you can keep your recency of practice.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Because it's one of the main requirements for all ITPs, like internationally trained physicians, that they have to keep their recency of practice in order to be eligible to apply both for CARMS and practice-ready assessment. And they need like certain number of hours. They don't like need like limited time. No, they need like you have to have 3 months or 6 months, which is a very long time to be outside of Canada.
Do you believe internationally trained doctors should be assessed before receiving permanent residency so they know if they're able to practice in Canada?
What I think is they should have a better picture about the process here, having all the information and having the availability of starting the process when they are still in their countries before coming here. It will be easier to even close the gap of recent practice. So if we can start all the exams or get all our credentials and everything done before we come here, it would be much easier.
According to the Health Minister's own department, there are currently over 80,000 health professionals in Canada who are not working in their field. You are one of them.
Yes.
The government keeps saying we need more immigrants to solve the healthcare problem, but they have failed the immigrant doctors who are already here in Canada. Do you believe the government should focus on licensing immigrant doctors already here in Canada first before adding more people to a broken system?
Yes, for sure, because you have already a big pool of internationally trained physicians here who have already passed all the exams, all the required exams, got their credentials verified, and they are ready to serve, and they are already contributing to the healthcare system here by either working as a clinical assistant, volunteering, doing many things. So why are you bringing more from outside the country when we are still here and we are already Canadian citizens here?
Would you support a national testing standard to more quickly and effectively test internationally trained health professionals that would streamline the licensure process instead of having a fragmented approach in each province?
A national process, yes, it would be very much easier, but we need it to be a fair, transparent national process, not just a national process, but it needs to be a fair and transparent and leading at the end to licensure. Not just national process with no guarantee at the end, but we need that it's guaranteed to get your license at the end.
Under the current system, do you think you will ever become a family doctor in Canada?
I'm hoping. I'm trying my best. But
30
with
seconds.
the recent changes, I don't know if this is becoming possible or not.
Do you think Canada needs to increase practice-ready assessment capacity?
They need to increase practice. They need to increase practice-ready assessment and need to increase also the spots available for ITPs in CARMS. We need both to be increased. It's a big pool, so it needs a lot of seats to accommodate us.
Thank you very much. I think that time is
Thank
up,
you.
Mr. Major. Mr. Pulowski, 6 minutes, please.
Dr. Bichet, where are you now currently working?
I'm working as a physician navigator in the emergency department of Brampton.
Okay, would you be willing to come to Northwestern Ontario? We have several communities in my riding. I would note particularly Rainy River, a small town which had 3 doctors, who has currently no doctors. We're going to get to the licensing question shortly. However, would you be willing to go up there? The weather is kind of like Egypt, but slightly better. And in addition, you could buy a house up there for $200,000. You could get a mansion, unlike in Brampton. Would you be willing to go there if there was an avenue to get you there and allow you to practice medicine there?
Yes, for sure. I'm willing to move. Even we are trying to reach out to all these areas to the north. We are willing to move to north areas in Ontario and all over it.
Absolutely, we want you. So let me get to the next part of my questioning and to Ms. Price. Who finances your organization? Is there federal money in there, or is?
No, FEMRAC is funded by the medical regulatory authorities themselves, so those 13 organizations.
So through the provinces. So I got to say, and the question was like, can we license you? We're kind of limited as the federal government because licensing is provincial jurisdiction. So we are looking at how we can help this process out. Let me ask you, Ms. Price, which province is doing a good job in terms of practice-ready assessments? I know it's variable. I know, and I was part of perhaps having it happen in Ontario. Ontario started practice-ready assessments recently, but my understanding is the number of people go through practice-ready assessments is fairly small, like 60 or something a year, which hardly makes a dent. Which is, I'll accept the Conservatives' addition to that question. Why aren't there more position practice-ready assessments, and which provinces are doing a particular good job on this?
So I would say every province is working hard on this, and some provinces have been doing it for much longer than others, and some are just studying right now how to implement practice-ready assessment programs. And I wouldn't be qualified to say which is doing the best job. But why do we not have more positions would be because you require assessors in those programs. And so in some of the programs, assessors are paid and trained, and in some of the programs, they are not. And so being able to fund those programs would allow us to expand them.
Now, is there a province that you think has dealt with this? Because I've heard this is an issue, having enough supervisors, right? Because you have to have the immigrant doctor working with a Canadian doctor. And there may be costs associated with that. Is there a model that you can give us in terms of like which province seems to have been more successful with this?
There's a recent example in Nova Scotia. The Physician Assessment Centre of Excellence has done a really good job of setting up a custom-built location for this, where they can record the interactions, where they can assess all the individual observable activities with patients, where they have trained the assessors and are paying them. They've created a community of assessors who work together and I think feel like they are contributing as a community, which makes a difference. So there are definitely some models that would be worth expanding.
If you could send us the information on that, it could certainly be added to the study. In terms of top-up training, we heard the importance of top-up training. Which provinces allow that kind of top-up training? Because it seems like there's a certain number of people who shouldn't have to go through medical school through residency, but may, and I think you said that, may need some additional training in certain areas. Again, which provinces have done a better job with that?
I would agree that definitely bridging programs or top-up training would be effective for people who have most of the skills, but not all of the skills that we would expect for licensure in Canada. I'm aware of programs that exist in Manitoba to do this, but my lack of awareness does not mean there aren't other programs.
Would you suggest that the regulatory agencies in Canada, the nursing schools, medical schools, ought to be addressing this issue, that there is a kind of vacuum there? And we heard from the Conservatives, and I agree, there's a lot of medical professionals already in this country who aren't being recognized. Would you suggest that the various entities like the medical schools ought to be trying to start programs to address this?
Yes, and I think they are. I come this week from a conference of regulators and one last week on the Canadian health workforce, and this is an issue of grave concern for educators and regulators in all of the healthcare professions.
Is it who would be trying to deal with this situation? The medical schools?
Depends on the province, of course. So sometimes those PRA programs are run by the regulator, sometimes they are housed within the medical school, and sometimes they're done privately. But it varies by province.
Most of the federal involvement in healthcare comes through transfers from the federal government to the province. My understanding is that we can put conditions on it. There are times when the federal government directly invests in healthcare. Do you think perhaps a valuable way that the federal government can increase the number of family doctors out there would be to invest directly in programs in provinces which offer practice-ready assessments?
Yes, I think funding would help, and practice-ready assessments are an excellent way of getting internationally trained physicians into practice and licensed.
Thank you very much. I now go to Monsieur Theriault for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Dr. Bichet, I know what I'm going to say is not going to perhaps soothe you or comfort you, and this is, I want to ask Dr. Bernard as well, what do you think about a situation as described by your colleague? Do you have a solution?
First, I want to say we connected just before, and I'm from Brampton as well, and I'm happy to see that she's getting some experience in the emergency department. But just what was being discussed in terms of bridging programs, the medical internationally trained physicians are left on their own at this point in time to try and figure out how they can bridge, how they can obtain whatever it is they need to obtain to be able to jump over the next hoop. Creating programs to help people get to where they need to be is something that we have been working on really hard at the College of Family Physicians of Canada, and collaborating. We're seeing more collaboration than we've ever seen before with our regulators. We meet with FEMRAC, we meet with the provincial regulators to try and solve this. It's correct that it's different across provinces, but we need to clearly articulate the paths, clearly articulate and fund ways for people to gain the skills if they are missing them. If there's a hoop they couldn't jump through, there's just one thing they needed to do to be able to obtain, whether that is a CARM spot, if that's what they want, or whether it's licensure through the PRA system. We need to be able to allow people to contribute where they're at and bridge them so that when they're done, they can be a fully certified family physician. There are places where people train internationally. They just don't do mental health. For example, in Denmark, family physicians do not prescribe antidepressants. Well, that's okay to start off when you're here, but you would need to take a course to make sure that in a couple of years, you could be prescribing antidepressants. So what you quite rightly articulated, who does it, who pays for it. Our medical schools are struggling. They don't have enough money. We would love to develop the programs at the College of Family Physicians, but we're busy dealing with the programs we have right now. So targeted funding for PRAs, targeted funding for bridging programs, and making sure there are more PRAs. You heard my colleague is in Ontario. To even access a PRA would be difficult given the number of spots that we have. Thank you.
Il est clair, en tout cas, que...
Well, it seems quite clear that with respect to the Immigration Canada rules, that the information that is given out does not correspond to the reality that they find when they come to the country. If I'm not mistaken, in Quebec, there is a fast track that indicates you can be fast-tracked in terms of knowledge, but as you indicated earlier, you would have to leave the practice for at least 3 years. So elsewhere in Canada, it seems to me that there is a gap in communication that is quite significant. People, Dr. Bichet, this is a question that I'm addressing to you. The people who come here and who did not apply before immigrating, and then they have to go back out of the country to practice because they have to maintain their level of practice elsewhere. So if it's 3 years that is involved, like you do presently, it strikes me that the rules are not clear. The information distributed by Immigration Canada is not clear.
Yes, it's not clear, and we are not, like Dr. Bernard was saying, we're not supported here by even other options to maintain our recent practice, which is a big requirement, obviously, in all the programs we are applying to. So we need to have like some flexibility, some options here, because not all of us can return to their country to maintain the recent practice, either for financial reasons, for family reasons. Some have war in their countries, a lot of reasons. So we need to have like a standardized pathway for filling this gap, like a licensed, for example, a clinical assistant role that can lead at the end to licensure or help you to get into the PRE. Some clear pathways and some clear information would help a lot of ITPs to be integrated into the system.
Finish, Mr. Thériault?
Je suis curieux.
Are you finished, Mr. Thériault? Well, one thing. I'm curious, Dr. Bernard, I don't know how long you've been in your position, but have you ever, to your mind, known any consultation with Immigration Canada about this issue of accessibility?
Seconds.
At this point in time, for over the time that I've been in the position, there has not been a consultation. This is our first consultation.
Thank you very much, Doc. And I now go to the second round. It's a 5-minute round. But I think given the time, we are may not be able to do the whole 2 parts of the round. So, because as we said, we'd agreed we'd end at 5 minutes after. So I go to Ms. Conance for 5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My first question is to Ms. Price. It's a yes or no question. Did the Federal Immigration Department consult with the Federation of Medical Regulatory Authorities of Canada on this year's Federal Immigration Levels Plan?
No.
Did the Federal Immigration Department ask your organization for data on the current capacity of Canada's healthcare system?
No.
Would you like to be consulted? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, my next question is for Dr. Bichet. I want to say first that I am so sorry for what you've had to go through, and I appreciate your story, especially since you don't have to go to Northern Ontario, but you can. That'd be great. But come to Prince George, as my colleague just said, or come to the Okanagan, the Boundary Country, the Kootenays, Similkameen in my region in British Columbia, and you will find hospitals that are closing multiple days a year. Emergency rooms, some are 50 days a year, are closing suddenly because they don't have enough doctors and nurses. So I really appreciate your story, and I'm glad we're going to do something about it. Dr. Bichet, it's been reported there are 5,000 internationally trained physicians practicing in BC. Do you have an estimate for how many physicians, nurses, and other medical professionals might be trained but unable to practice in British Columbia?
I don't have an exact number, but I know there are thousands of us all over the country in every province.
Dr. Bichet, again, with your heartfelt story, were you promised a position as a doctor? Were you promised before you came over, before you committed your life and your family's life to moving to Canada?
So when you see that your scores on the immigration topped up because you are a doctor, you feel that you're going to be appreciated. You're going to be having an opportunity to practice medicine over there. When you feel that your credentials are verified, you feel that this country is welcoming you and they need you. But when you land here, you find many and many barriers coming after one another. So when you fulfill one requirement, you get the other barrier to try to fulfill.
Sounds like that. Is there an issue where internationally trained professionals in Canada who train abroad can't get credentials recognized in Canada but go to the United States instead?
I've seen many people. So after trying many years, of course, you lose hope. You cannot keep pushing here if you cannot practice your profession at the end. And if you are offered there in another country, either the US or UK, I've seen people going to Australia. Okay. If you see there's an opportunity for you, you go there, of course.
Okay, I'd like to cede my time to Dr. Strauss.
Thank you. Dr. Bradshaw, thank you for that. That was a really helpful presentation, and some of the numbers were very stark. You said we're 23,000 GPs short, or family doctors short in Canada, and 6.5 million Canadians don't have access to a family doctor. Just to, not to put too fine a point on it, but would you agree with me that if I don't have access to, if I'm one of those 6.5 million Canadians who don't have access to a family doctor, would you agree I'm sort of definitionally not receiving proper health care?
I'm going to take the compliment of Carrie Bradshaw and assume you're talking to me.
Oh, I was. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Bernard.
That's okay. Yeah, having a family physician is a super important part of having access to the excellent health care that Canadians all expect and deserve.
Okay, thank you. So that's like 15% of Canadians are definitely not receiving proper health care right now, just based on those stark numbers. And Dr. Bernard, when you hear Dr. Bichet's story...
30 seconds.
In your view, does your organization have a pretty good idea when somebody... when Dr. Bichet gives her demographic data, let's say, like her age and the med school she went to and her test scores and the sort of things that she gave to Immigration Canada, could your organization give a pretty good sense based on data of whether she's likely to be successful when she comes here at obtaining a Canadian license?
I don't think we have drilled the data down to likelihood of success because there are so many factors and it's very dependent on province and what is needed in each province and what particular if they're the PRAs in certain provinces will allow somebody to practice without certain skills, but not in other provinces. So it would be difficult to actually give a guess.
Thank you. And then one really quick question for Ms. Price. Ms. Price, so when you hear that, but I should think that if the Family Doctor College gives an immigrant with permanent residence the proper certification, that they would almost certainly be able to apply or practice in each province.
Yes, certification is one of the important requirements. It's accepted in every province and territory, but as you've heard from Dr. Bichet, currency of practice will also be an issue.
Okay. Could you give us a sense of those who do obtain FCPC, what proportion of those will be allowed to practice in one or another province?
I would think all, but I'm not certain.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go now to Mr. Ailson for 5 minutes, please, for the Liberals.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you all for coming. Very, very valuable testimony. Dr. Bernard, good to see you again. I enjoyed that evening reception where myself and Dr. Mazier were there. There's an inside joke of something happened there. Yeah. Before I fell down. Yeah. So we, one of the common themes that we found, and again, in my previous tenure in the federal government, is, of course, when we want to give funding to provinces for a given initiative, that there's sometimes some pushback to say that, you give us the funding, but there's a resistance to targeted funding. Would you advocate, if the federal government were to come up with funding directly to things like these, supporting these practices to do practice-ready assessments, would you advocate to the provinces to say, allow the federal government to do this without invoking the Canada Health Act to say you're not allowed to do that?
I think 100% at this point in time. I think there's a huge appetite for working together across provinces to better supply people with family physicians. If it's ever going to happen, it can happen now. And I think everybody can get behind whatever it takes to help people who have the skill to care for Canadians get in the right place to care for them.
All right, thank you. My next question is from Ms. Price. Thank you for coming. Now, you talked about the criteria that the regulatory agencies have for practice, and you listed them all. When someone does a residency, whether it's a CCFP or the Canadian College of Family Physicians residency, whether this is a Royal College residency in surgery, obstetrics, psychiatry, they also have those in their criteria. I cannot graduate from a Royal College residency without also satisfying all those criteria. I would not be considered eligible to go to write my exams before writing them. I would not have my FRCP. What I'm asking is there any or what is your view on saying, well, if you have satisfied these criteria in one of these residency programs, should that not be enough of a criteria to practice medicine in any given province?
That does. People completing residency programs in Canada, sitting their exams and becoming certified, those people will meet the requirements for licensure.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, without the process, for instance, I did a residency in 1998. Applied for my license through the provincial process. Have a license in Manitoba. I had an opportunity to also do some work in Ontario. I had to submit a tremendous amount of paperwork, a letter from my medical school, a letter from the medical school. I was one of the last people that did the old-fashioned internship. I had to get a letter from my med school that I did the internship. I had to get a letter from the Royal College. And all, which not only took time, but I had to pay for all these things as well. So this is all at my expense and with a tremendous amount of work and delay. Why would not the fact that this was good enough for Manitoba be then good enough to Ontario and just say, okay, we'll ask, well, why couldn't the Ontario College say, yeah, did he submit all this stuff? Okay, great, here we go. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question. So the National Registry of Physicians will help us do that because, as the Canada Free Trade Agreement allows, if you are licensed in one province or territory, you can become licensed in another with minimal assessment. When moving from one province to another, your language and your character can be checked. And so those are the two things that physicians may be asked to submit documentation to support when they are trying to achieve licensure today. But I would say that a lot of progress has been made in that regard. And mobility is much better. I'm not sure when your personal experience took place, but
this is in the early 2000s.
30 seconds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There have been significant improvements, and more are coming thanks to the National Registry of Physicians and our collaboration with the Medical Council of Canada.
Okay. In my last 15 seconds, is there a push or is there a barrier to the colleges just accepting one license that could be transferred to another province, or at least recognized in another province?
There isn't a barrier to the recognition. There are checks and balances to ensure that physicians who might have conduct concerns in one jurisdiction, that's known in a second jurisdiction where they're licensed, but I wouldn't call those barriers.
Thank you. I now go to Mr. Theriault for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernard. recently in Quebec and Ontario, we have seen a phenomenon that has been perhaps larger than in other countries. This lack of family doctors is something that it is sometimes compensated for by summer locums. And this, rather than having a specific specialty like being a family doctor. So the locum will work with a family doctor over the course of a summer. And how can you better integrate foreign doctors from elsewhere into a system like that? But it does not exist everywhere.
Merci pour la question.
I thank you for your question.
Who do locums, the way you're describing in smaller communities, actually are family physicians. So they have general practice family physician training, and they're more portable. Newly trained, internationally trained physicians, once they obtain licensure, are also free to do work like this. I would sort of put it that it might be a little bit more difficult for them initially, adapting to another community, and they probably would prefer to serve.
But why don't we train enough family physicians? Why not?
The decision is left to the provinces in terms of how many spots go to each specialty or subspecialty. That decision is made every year. There have been in certain provinces an increase in training spots. We have new medical schools that are happening that are devoting more and more time specifically to family medicine. And this is a move in the right direction, which we applaud. At the college, we have many suggestions that we've been sharing with your colleagues on how to increase the number of family physicians across the country, but it is an ongoing issue for which we need solutions.
Est-ce que c'est pas aussi un problème?
Is not also a problem of resources, the ability to open more positions for training?
We need funding for physicians. We also need funding for the learners. Like they have to go somewhere. So the people who are overburdened in their clinics need space for the learners to train. So it requires a whole approach to providing greater support.
Thank you, Doctor. The witnesses for taking time to come and present to us. And I am going to now move that we adjourn. Yes, yes.
Just have we had any word back from the immigration minister about a date when she'll appear at committee?
Can I let the witnesses go? You want to ask
well,
that question?
Just okay. Have we heard back?
The clerk will answer that because she gets those responses. Did we hear back from immigration?
No response yet from the immigration minister.
We have had it from health, but not from immigration.
Thank you.
Thank you. I adjourn. This meeting is adjourned.